Hey Tiv, I'm working on a theory video, but I keep running into roadblocks and I need someone to bounce ideas off of.
Yeah, sure. Just give me a second.
Cool. Okay, what's the video about? Angel beats.
Oh, so you're finally taking another stab at that theory. What's it been? What, 8, 9 years?
Man, I've been making anime videos for such a long time. But before we start, you have watched Angel Beats, right? Because if you haven't, I'm going to be spoiling it.
You mean the 13-episode self-contained single-season series with 2 OVAs that can be enjoyed in both sub and dub, depending on your definition of enjoyed, and follows the story of the not-yet-dead Battlefront as they fight against God in the purgatory of the afterlife, rebelling against God for their lives that were cut short. Angry at God, they reject reincarnation and fight against God by staying in the afterlife and fighting his minion, Angel, who seeks to forcefully reincarnate them. However, throughout the story of the series, they discover the truth of why they ended up in purgatory, or as I refer to it, the school, as we follow our main POV character, Otonashi, who appears at the entrance of the school with amnesia, having no knowledge of how he died or who he is, which, according to Angel, is quite common for those who injured their head before dying. That Angel beats?
You could have just said yes, dude, but yeah, that Angel beats.
Yeah, of course, I've watched it, so no need to worry about spoiling it for me. Talk away.
As we find out later in the series, the school exists as a plane of purgatory for those who died being unable to fulfill that which they wanted to in life, allowing them to do so in the afterlife and rest in peace. Or maybe be reincarnated. It's a bit confusing and never made clear what actually happens after they fulfill their regret.
Is that what you're having trouble with? The argument of how reincarnation and the afterlife both exist in the series? Because I can easily answer that.
Oh, no, that's not the problem. I can easily answer that too. But that's not the topic here. The question I have is, why did Otonashi end up in the afterlife when he did?
Wait. Have you not finished the series?
Yeah, of course I have. I've made videos on it.
Then you'd know that the reason Otonashi was sent to the school was to help Kanade conclude her unfinished business.
Yeah, I know that. Kanade ended up at the school because she wanted to thank the person who donated their heart to her, which allowed her to live her fullest life, which turned out to be Otonashi.
Oh yeah! I see where you're coming from now. It's the age-old question. If Otonashi died before Kanade, why did he arrive at the school after her? What was your original theory? His brain was cut up or something?
Yeah. Back in the original video, I theorized that Otonashi had gone into the actual afterlife beyond purgatory as he had no unfinished business. But because he donated his organs sometime after his heart had been given to Kanade, his brain was used for science and cut into, which caused his amnesia and sent him to the school. That was a fun theory, but
that in itself brings up many other questions, doesn't it?
Yeah, because if that is true, that would mean anyone who donated their organs to science would also end up in purgatory at some point if their brain was ever cut into. And then they would arrive with amnesia and no reason to know what to do, being permanently trapped in purgatory for donating their organs.
You know, that's kind of dark and dystopian when you think about it. You're ripped from the afterlife and made to suffer for all eternity with no knowledge of why and no way of escaping.
Though, in reality, the actual answer is so much simpler. Otonashi died without regrets and went to the afterlife. And then when Kanade died, she went to the school, where in order to move on, she needed to thank the person who gave her heart. So Otonashi was brought to the school.
But of course, that raises a plot hole.
Exactly. If Otonashi donated his heart to Kanade, why did Otonashi appear at the school after Kanade? Surely when Kanade appeared at the school, Otonashi should have also arrived at the same time.
Perhaps Kanade had amnesia as well. And it wasn't until the night Otonashi arrived at the school that she remembered why she was sent to the school. That is why he arrives.
That is an answer, but annoyingly, no matter how much I theorize about it, the end result is always the same. Well, I can't prove it isn't the answer. Like the time you tried to convince your teacher a ninja stole your homework out of your bag. First off, I stand by that. That was the only possible answer and I stand by that to this day. But secondly, you're totally right. I can't prove Angel Beats didn't play out like that. But at the same time, it feels kind of lazy and overly
Sort of like
convenient.
when the main character just happens to randomly find the super special, ancient, one-of-a-kind object that only their bloodline can use that is needed to defeat the big threat in the story.
Pretty much, yeah.
I really dislike that trope. It's just lazy and not creative.
I know, right? But no matter what I theorize, I can't prove any of my theories to be the answer, nor can I claim the only possible answer left from the evidence presented in the series, which requires astronomical leaps in suspension of disbelief and logic, isn't the answer.
Well, a theory is just a theory. You don't have to prove it. It's just a theory, not a claim. So, what is your theory?
Well, that's the problem. I don't really have one. Every time I try and make one, there's not enough viable evidence to make it stand. And even the strongest argument can be derailed by the not being able to prove it didn't happen in the most unlikely way. The biggest roadblock in any argument when it comes to talking about the series is one goddamn throwaway comment made in one of the OVAs claiming Yuri had been at the school long enough to be a grandma. While I'm sure this is just a throwaway line, it still implies Yuri had been at the school for at least a few decades. Despite this, in episode 2 when we see Yuri's backstory, we see our house had a flat screen TV, a modern piece of technology, and when Otonashi remembers his life in the living world, he is shown to have a flip phone, the, at the time, modern phone. So there are only two real answers. One, Otonashi died decades after Yuri, and the technology of the world grounded to a standstill, so the technology that was present when Yuri was alive was still the same technology used decades later, as well as the post-ending scene that takes place in an unspecified amount of time later, but that's a whole other video topic.
However, that still makes no sense. If Yuri died decades before Otonashi, and Kanade died after Otonashi, if Yuri had been at the school long enough to be a grandma, that would also imply Kanade had been there for decades, which would imply Kanade was at the school before she'd even been born in the mortal world.
Exactly! Or theory number 2, the school exists outside of time, and this does make sense. There is no reason for the afterlife to adhere to the same laws of reality as the mortal world, as we see the ability to build anything out of anything, materialize objects, and, the most obvious, survive a fatal injury. However, despite being the most rational answer, it raises so many more problems.
Such as...
Well, if the school does exist outside of time, and we go with the theory of Kanade had amnesia until moments before the series started, it explains how Kanade and Yuri could have been fine for so long, and why Otonashi arrived at the school after Kanade. But if the school does exist outside of time, why doesn't every teenager throughout all of time who have died appear at the school all at once?
I think I can actually answer that for you. You're thinking of purgatory in the same way you're thinking of the mortal world.
What do you mean?
Well, just because everyone who died comes from the same plane doesn't mean they all ended up at the same location.
Okay. I'm listening.
You're thinking of the school as a singular plane of purgatory, but there's no reason the school isn't just one of many nodes of different versions of purgatory. The school that we see in the series may just be one of a collection of schools, where those who died with unfulfilled lives are randomly sent. On top of which, perhaps each plane of purgatory is filtered by year. While we don't know what year Angel Beats takes place in, as it was released in 2010 and the technology within the series seems to reflect that era of time, a strong argument could be made that the series takes place in 2010 or within a window of those years. The school we see in the series is one for those who died either within 2010 or within a window of that time, who did so with regrets. Then, beyond the school, those who died with regrets between 2020 and 2030 were sent to a different version of purgatory that better reflects the time of the mortal world. Or to put it another way, it wouldn't really make sense for a Victorian teenager to be sent to purgatory that was built on a reflection of the modern world. They would have no way of understanding what a computer was, or what half the subjects in school that they were being taught were.
So, do you reckon there is a version of the school where they have to enforce social distancing?
I mean, probably, but the story was published a decade before those events, so it's not really something we should try and retcon insert into the series.
Okay, yeah, that is a good argument, but do you have any evidence for it?
Based on your argument that the school exists outside of time, if that is true, the only answer would be that either, as you said, every person who died with regrets would end up there at the same time, or there are many different purgatories and are broken up into age groups, which would explain why everyone who ended up at the school were all around the same age bracket.
Okay, like I said, that is a good argument, but you still haven't presented any evidence. Plus, a theory like that brings into question a bunch of other problems.
Name 11.
Why 11?
Why not? Why not 11?
Okay, well, I can't name 11, but such a theory does have rather large oversights in it. First off, if Kanade was able to live a full life because of getting the heart, why is she still a teenager in the afterlife? This would imply she died shortly after getting her heart transplant. One answer is that when you die, you're returned to your teenage self for reasons. As I said, I can't prove this isn't the answer, but it seems strange that every other member in the series died as a teenager, while Angel is the only one that grew old, died, and then returned to her pubescent self.
Perhaps since she technically died on the table when she had her original heart removed, that was when she showed up at the school, which, because it exists outside time, allowed her to live an eternity at the school in the time it took for her doctor to transplant Otonashi's heart into Kanade.
While that is an answer, if it is the answer, it raises more questions that don't have answers. Such as, if the school exists outside of time, why did it take so long for Otonashi to appear at the school?
Well, that just falls back on the amnesia reason, right?
Sure, but why did Kanade have amnesia?
Because she did?
And again, we fall back into the I can't prove that isn't the answer argument.
Yeah, I guess you're right.
And there's my problem. I can't prove this isn't the answer.
So the best answer you have is the school existed outside of time and Kanade had amnesia.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's not a bad theory, but I see your point.
So, I'm not really sure what to do. I could make a video explaining that theory, but it's got no credible evidence to back it up.
You could always just make a video presenting the pieces of the puzzle and see if your OTs can figure it out.
Are we set on calling them OTs?
I mean, you can always change it later, but I think it's a good name for your community. Plus, it's a pun, and you love puns.
Well, that's true. I guess we're sticking with OTs then.
Although, what if Kanade actually did live a full life and died as an old lady, but because Otonashi died as a teenager, in order for Kanade to thank him, they both need to be on the same purgatory age bracket plane. So she was reverted back to being a teenager at the same age as Otonashi was when he died.
Again, do you have any evidence for that?
Not really, no.
Also, considering Kanade falls in love with Otonashi, what does it say for her mortal life? If she did die at the end of a full life, surely she would have fallen in love with someone, probably started a family, and may have even had grandchildren. It kind of paints a story of angel beats in a weird light if you look at it in that case. It would suggest Kanade was actually an old lady who fell in love with a teenager who donated his heart to her.
Maybe that's why she had amnesia.
Yeah, what do you mean?
Maybe when she died, all of her memories from beyond the day she got the transplant were forgotten because of the amnesia. And eventually she remembered that she wanted to thank the person who gave her her heart. And that was the night of the first episode when Otonashi arrived. As far as Kanade is aware, she knows she lived a full life, but she can't remember any of it.
That is pretty loose. You know, I don't like it, and there is no evidence for it, but I think the most plausible theory is the entirety of Angel Beat takes place in the seconds between the doctors turning off the heart pump machine that's keeping Kanade alive, which made her legally dead, and Otonashi's heart beating inside her chest for the first time. But that still doesn't explain why it took so long for Otonashi to show up at the school.
Maybe it still was amnesia.
Why though?
Well, in the seconds between turning off the machine and Otonashi's heart beating inside her chest for the first time, there is no blood being pumped around her body. So Kanade's brain was technically brain dead, which could have caused the amnesia.
Do you actually believe that though? Well, again, it falls back on the I can't prove this isn't the argument.
Hey, what about the post-credit scene?
What about it?
Well, you said that talking about that is a video of its own. So, is it really that complicated? I think it's pretty simple.
Well, if we say the unbacked theory we do have here is the answer, that brings up so many more questions. But I'm going to go work on the script for this theory, so we can discuss that at a later date, I guess.
Yeah, no worries. I still have a ton of research to do for the next big video anyway, so yeah.